Hi there, today we will be talking about Lab 7, that is about fibers. We'll be beginning by talking about 3 different types of surface fibers. The first plant that we're going to discuss today is one that makes up most of your clothes and has shaped our nation, cotton. So as you can see here, we have a dried specimen of cotton. This is the scientific name for cotton, Gossypium hirsutum. It's in the Malvaceae or hibiscus family. And these are surface seeds that are coming from the hairs, and they're very hard to separate in some cases. As you can see, we have Gossypium fruits or cotton fruits right here. And they are very entangled and dry. And the seeds themselves are kind of wrapped and entangled within the fibers. We have a seed right there, but it's difficult to isolate that seed. Here's what the plant looks like alive. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find it here in McCarty. What we did find is a hibiscus. Lab 7, Section 2, stem or bast fibers. These are fibers derived from the stems of dicots. One example of these is flax. Flax is a eudicot, and it has fibers that can be extracted using retting. Here we have a very shaky slide of flax. The stains are used to point out the fibers in this cross-section of the stem. So we're going to look at whole flax fibers underneath the microscope. These are much different than cotton. They are thick-walled, and we're going to see some nodes interspaced in between these. Here's a whole thread of flax, and you can see how the pointer is pointing to the swollen area or the swollen nodes on the cord of the flax. And here are some beautiful images of flax if you have never seen it before. And it's often stronger when it's wet, so it's often made into dish towels such as these. Here we have a large pile of flax. You can see it kind of resembles hair. And remember, this is removed from the stem by a process called retting, where in some cases it's soaked for a long time to release the fibers from the stem. The next bast or soft fiber we'll discuss is hemp, Cannabis sativa. You've likely seen this before, but as is noted at the bottom, the fiber-producing variety of hemp has a very low level of THC, so any psychoactive chemicals are pretty low in these plants that are produced just for fibers. See that hemp fiber is a lot like flax. They're both from a stem. It's pliable but less fine than flax. As you can see, flax looks more like hair. This is kind of a rough hair. It's important not to confuse manila hemp with this hemp, Cannabis sativa, completely different. These are fibers that are also extracted by retting, and they're used for many different things, as you can see. And the Declaration of Independence was actually drawn up on hemp paper. Hemp fibers can also be used for decorative and artistic purposes. And we're going to take a look at the fibers associated with the phloem here through the microscope. We're going to take a look at some whole hemp fibers, which are very thick-walled, straight. And here are those hemp fibers. They can be distinguished by not having the nodes like flax does. The next bast fiber is jute, also in Malvaceae. Here we have jute being harvested. Here's an entire roll of jute fiber. It's kind of rough. Jute has been commonly used to make things called gunny sacks. These are very durable weaved bags. Here is just a massive pile of white jute. Hibiscus cannabinus, in the hibiscus family, confusing, is also another producer of a fiber, specifically called kenaf. And we have that here. Yet another example of soft or bast fibers from the Malvaceae family is Eurena lobata. This is an invasive species here in Florida, and it spreads very quickly. Here is some fibers that have been extracted from it. Actually makes quite beautiful fiber. And here's the live plant itself. So it is a mess. It spreads very quickly, but notice it still has those typical, although wilted, Malvaceae flowers. And these 5-parted seeds develop and break off into 5 parts, and they have terrible hooks. I've gotten 100 of them literally stuck in my hair from volunteer efforts to pull these plants. Well worth it. In the Urticaceae family, we have Rami, which is the common name for this nettle here. And believe it or not, this sweater is made of 55% Rami, so maybe a little itchy, irritating. Here are some Rami fibers. You can see they're typically pretty soft. And here is Rami itself. It is a nettle. Nettles are known for their stinging properties. They can certainly increase your circulation, but I would be careful when hanging around them. This is a very important distinction to make sure you're aware of. The difference between the venation patterns between eudicot and monocot leaves. Remember that eudicots have a netted leaf-like venation. Monocot leaves, as shown here, typically have parallel venations. See, the leaves go down the entirety, or the veins, go entirely from the base to the tip of the leaf, parallel to each vein. That's an important distinction to make because as we move on to monocot fibers instead, like the Spanish needle, which is used by Native Americans essentially as a needle and thread. This is called yucca, is the genus. And these are cords that I was able to pull from yucca. You would not be able to pull such fibers from a dicot leaf because they're not arranged in this flat pattern like this. It would be much more difficult to corticate or remove down to the fibrous material a netted vein leaf. Since we'll be focusing on monocots, here's a monocot leaf we brought in from a plant called Sterlitzia, which is actually found right outside of Rolfs. It is the bird of paradise flower. And if you notice, the fibers of this plant are located in the stem of the leaf of a monocot, parallel veins. Here are the Spanish needles, again up close, also called Yucca alifolia. And this is the very, very complicated inflorescence of the bird of paradise. We just brought in for reference. Notice it has a lot of plant exudates coming from it. So now we are focusing on section 3, the leaf or the hard fibers. And we will start by talking about Manila hemp. Musa is a banana family within the banana family, and that is a monocot. Remember not to get this Manila hemp confused with the cannabis family or any other hemp we have mentioned. And here is an example of that, Manila hemp. Old George Washington $1 bill here is made up of cotton and linen. And $1 bills actually had fibers of musa, so this is before Ecuador switched from this currency. Their bills were made of musa leaves, partially. Sisal is part of the fibers you can get from the agave plant. And here's an example of that. By corticating the leaves, you can reach down to those fibers. These are those vascular bundles that are very, very thick and parallel to each other as they are in monocots. So now we're going to look at a slide of an agave leaf to see those vascular bundles. Here's a cross-section of an agave leaf. It's important to notice that all the vascular bundles are located on the bottom of that leaf. All of that top tissue can be removed to reveal those vascular bundles or cordage, which can be used to make things like sisal. We also have some other fibers to look at in this lab as well. These include an invasive species called paper mulberry. We do have two native mulberry species, but this one, as I noted, is invasive and spreads very quickly. And here's a note talking about paper mulberry. It's actually called kapa in Hawaii. And this is actually a species where its name kind of sounds like paper mulberry at the end. Paprifera, difficult word to say. Here's some wood extracted from that plant. And some lovely artwork made using this wood as well. And the saddest plant sample you've ever seen. It's normally very fuzzy, but right now it is still fuzzy and soft, but the leaves have seen better days. Now we're going to take a quick look at some animal fibers. Here's a ball of wool. This fiber is actually hair and typically used to make yarn. It is hard to believe, but silk is also an animal fiber produced by the caterpillars of certain cocoons. Now we're going to take a look at a slide of wool. Notice the scale-like appearance versus a slide of silk. Here's a slide of wool, and as you can notice, the hairs do have a scale-like appearance, just like our own hairs. Here's a slide demonstrating some silk, and it is much smoother than the wool. Now we will look briefly at some minimally processed fibers. You recognize this guy. This is Spanish moss. Remember, it is not a moss, but it's in the pineapple family. That's just a common name. So this has actually been used and fermented and used to stuff automobile seats, which is odd. Here's a dried sample of that. And believe it or not, the loofah that you use in your bath or shower, there's actually a plant that produces a loofah gourd. So it's very, very cool and amazing. You can just grow a loofah on a vine. We'll briefly talk about synthetic fibers. Notice that synthetic fibers are petroleum products. They can also be quite expensive. Here we have a sisal rug, only $200. Coir rugs, very expensive as well. Jute drapes, very nice. Linen is a wonderful fabric for Florida. It's very lightweight and a bit expensive, as we see. Washed hemp just has that cool natural look. Here's some light-hearted linen. Lovely. Here is pure beech made from modal. This station is dedicated to forensic botany and using fibers to identify culprits. We have a case here, some evidence to look at. We also have 4 suspects, A through D. Suspect A is pictured here. Suspect B is on a slide pictured here. Suspect C and Suspect D. So I will include photographs of those suspects so you can see for yourself who did it.